What is up, fellow nerds, and welcome back to the Dapper Snapper Gaming channel, and welcome back to How Do I Want to Do This? This is our series where we take a look at all playable options available to players in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, then we rank them on a scale of 1 to 10 and either build them or fix them depending on how they rank. Now, today we are starting a new class here on the channel. We just finished up talking about druids, and so now it is time to move on to fighters. So if you like hitting stuff, this might just be your ticket. So go ahead and leave a like on the video and subscribe if you haven't already. As you can see, most people who watch the channel are not subscribed. So please don't be one of those people. If you're new here, subscribe. If you've been here a while, definitely subscribe. What are you doing? And then of course, click the bell so you're notified when new videos are uploaded, and share the video with your friends. Before we jump into it today, I want to make sure that I get one thing out of the way. Number one, I want you to leave me a comment down below letting me know what your favorite fighter subclass is, or whichever one you are looking forward to most being covered / fixed / built in this series. Number two, I've messed around with the camera settings a lot on the camera that I'm using, and I think it's made a drastic change. To me, it's for the better, but I want to know what you all think down in the comments below. Just let me know. I think it's a lot better than it was before, but that's just me. I'd love to hear from you all. With that out of the way, let's go ahead and start the video. So the fighter gets a bad rap amongst a lot of experienced players for being generic, right? You hear this a lot, the human fighter. Oh no, somebody brought a human fighter. How, could you get any more original? That kind of thing. To me though, I think the fighter fills an interesting niche, and that is it's a really simple class to follow. Therefore, it is usually the class that I recommend for people to start off with if they aren't into wanting to keep up with a spell list. They're one of the few classes that get a new feature every single level, so you're constantly feeling like you're growing. You get to smack things with weapons, and so nothing is really too complicated outside of maybe some magic items that you get a hold of later on. But so it's really good for learning players. It's also really dangerous in the hands of experienced players who know how to abuse these things. There are several different ways that you can really make the fighter go absolutely nuts, and with certain weapons that may not normally shine. And it's all through this chassis right here. Does that make it better or equal to other classes that we have covered or will cover? Let's find out. As always with these videos, a little disclaimer before we jump in. This is an imperfect system. We are looking at these classes in sort of a bubble without any subclass features to go off of. We, of course, are making separate videos for every subclass in the coming weeks. So the subclasses are not involved here. We are just looking at the base chassis here and seeing how effective it is at getting the job done. And then, of course, we will see how each of the subclasses augments that going forward. But it is an imperfect system. Obviously, there will never be a character that is just fighter and no subclass. So it's not perfect, but there's not a whole lot of a better way to do it to compare classes to each other in this way. It is what it is. So just fair warning, it's kind of a weird system, but it's the best we can really do. Let's start off with our proficiencies and all of our starting stuff here just by being a fighter. Number one, we have a D10 as our hit die. That is the biggest one that we can get, at least that is widely available. Obviously, the barbarian gets a D12, but having a D10 is the largest one that we could have without being a barbarian. So that's already off to a great start. I'm very happy with having a D10. Definitely helps us with our survivability. We are statistically more likely to have more HP than other characters who have a D8 or a D6. So I'm cool with that. As far as our armor proficiencies, we get all of them as well as shields. So that's fantastic. For weapons, we get simple weapons and martial weapons. That's really good. We get no tool proficiencies, but really I don't care. Tools are just not great in 5e, to be honest, and so I don't think that really detracts very much from this. And you can also pick up tool proficiencies if you really want them from your background, so it's not that big of a deal to me personally, so it is what it is. Next, with saving throws, we get strength and constitution. This actually is not too bad. So normally every class gets a good and a bad saving throw proficiency. So the good ones would be dexterity, constitution, and wisdom, and the other three are considered the lesser than ones, right? Obviously intelligence is going to be your absolute worst one, but we don't have that here, which is good. We do have strength and constitution. I would say that strength would come up more than charisma and intelligence usually. Not necessarily, it depends on what you're fighting. Obviously, you will run into some charisma saving throws. You may run into one whole intelligence saving throw your entire career. It's very, very rare, but it could happen. But strength is going to be a little more common than the other ones, and constitution saving throws are very good. This is for maintaining concentration on spells. This would be for resisting like a poison type effect. Anything like that, that will definitely come up. It comes up quite a bit, both from monsters and if your teammates are reckless with what they use and put you right in the middle of a cloud kill, this could help as well. So it's helpful in those regards as well. So that's pretty good. We only get 2 skill proficiencies, which is less than some other classes, but it makes sense. We're here to fight. We're not necessarily here for the skill part, so it makes sense. As far as starting equipment goes, keep in mind, I don't really use this for ranking just because I know a lot of people who use gold buy, or they'll swap certain things out just depending on what your DM will allow you to use. So this doesn't really carry any stock, but we're going to cover it anyway. We get some chainmail, or we get leather armor and a longbow with 20 arrows. We get a martial weapon and a shield, or 2 martial weapons. We get a light crossbow and 20 bolts, or 2 hand axes, and a Dungeoneer's pack or an Explorer's pack. Like I said, a lot of people will end up going with gold buy and just picking certain things that you want anyway. That's fine. Like I said, I don't really use that in my ranking system just because I know a lot of people don't really care about starting equipment anymore. But if you do, there you go. It's there for you. It's not part of the ranking. As far as our starters here, our class features, it's really good, actually. Having a D10 as our base hit dice is really awesome. That's the highest one we can get besides Barbarian. We have all armor. We have basically all weapons. We have one of the better, lesser saving throw proficiencies, and then Constitution, which is also good. There's a reason that you see this a lot as a 1 or 2 level dip. You will see a ton, and I'm definitely guilty of this too, of people starting with the fighter class because you have such a strong starting chassis moving forward. This is a 10 out of 10 starter. You get so much out of this. You can have all of your armor proficiency. So this way, when you go into Wizard, you actually have some better armor choices that you can use, and you can use shields, you could use weapons. If you're a blade singer, you could actually have access to those early if you wanted to. You get a lot of really, really good stuff here just by taking this one level on top of a couple of features that we're going to get in just a second. Yes, we get 1 or 2 less skill proficiencies than other classes, but honestly, does that really matter? We're getting some from our background too, maybe 1 from your race, depending on what you go with. So it's not that big of a factor to me. As far as for starting out, this is a 10 out of 10. This is one of the best starting out kind of things that you could possibly have, if it's not the best. It's certainly the most popular, so I would say that it's probably the best. But you know, let me know in the comments. Do you think this is the best way to start at level 1 for most characters? I would say a lot of times the answer would be yes, just depending on where you're going with the build. At first level, we get a fighting style, and now this is not unique to fighters. However, there are certain fighting styles that are unique to fighters, and there are also certain fighting styles that are unique to other classes, which of course we will discuss later on once those come up. Now, we've talked about fighting styles very briefly on the channel before, just as we have multi-classed into fighter before, but I haven't really gone in depth on anything, so I'm going to go into depth a little bit more on this and their uses in general, especially on those that I have not talked about in the past on the channel. We'll start at the top with the archery fighting style. We get a +2 to our ranged weapon attacks. This is really good because it not only works with crossbows, and regular bows. It also works with things like slings, so you'll see this a lot on sling builds where people will take the archery fighting style. It also helps to work with things like the sharpshooter feat, where you would take a -5 to hit. This negates 2 of that. That can definitely make a big difference when you roll a mediocre roll but have a decent bonus to hit. This can definitely save you in that situation. So archery, yes, it's simple, but it's very effective at what it does. So I'm cool with that. It's very good. Blind fighting. Blind fighting is a interesting one that I think is actually pretty decent, but a lot of people pick other ones over this unless you're going for something specific. The reason is you do get blind sight out to a range of 10 feet. That range is quite limited, but you of course can see invisible creatures, you can see in the dark, you can see if you're blinded, you can see during all of these things, which means that if something else can't see in the dark, you have advantage on your attack against that creature that you can see. That's pretty good. That's really cool, and it definitely encourages you to put yourself into those situations where you can see the other creature and they can't see you. I like that. I think that's really helpful. I don't see this one getting used a ton though, outside of some very niche situations though, just because a lot of times a lot of your other options are going to end up being a little bit better. The third one is defense. We get a +1 to AC as long as we're wearing armor. Simple, effective. I like it. There's not a whole lot to go through there, so we'll just keep going. Dueling, we get a bonus of a +2 to our damage rolls if we are wielding a melee weapon in one hand. This means we can't have a two-handed weapon. This means we can't have two different weapons in each hand, but it does mean that we could have a weapon and, say, a wand. It does mean that we could have a weapon and a shield. Things like that. As long as it's not another weapon in your other hand, then you can use this and just get a flat +2 to damage rolls. I mean, that's a base rage bonus, right? Which is not too bad for not going barbarian. That's not too bad, and it doesn't even matter if you're raging. With this one, it's just all the time. So that's pretty cool. I like that one. That's not too bad. I definitely see this one getting some use for people using one-handed weapons. Gray weapon fighting is one that I see a lot of people take, but honestly, I don't see the hype around it. You get to re-roll 1s and 2s on your weapons that have 2 hands or the versatile property. The thing about this is that, number one, if you roll a 1 or a 2 again, you have to roll with it. Number 2, it is very statistically improbable that this is going to make a massive difference. Yes, there will be the times where you rolled a 1 and then you'll re-roll and get like a 7, right? That will happen. However, just as much of the time you will re-roll that 1 and get another 1, in which case, what do? You're just stuck and you basically feel like nothing happened. To me, you're statistically most likely to only get an improvement of 1 over the course of everything, and so I don't typically recommend this. I don't think that it mathematically works out in your favor nearly as much as what it seems to. Next, interception. This is one that I don't see very much of, but I kind of like it. Whenever you're within 5 feet of another creature that's getting attacked, you can reduce that damage by 1d10 plus your proficiency bonus, as long as you have a weapon or a shield in your hand. This is pretty interesting, right? Being able to reduce up to 16 damage once you are high enough level can be okay. It does not scale though, and 1d10 plus, 2 through 6 can definitely become mediocre as time goes on. And so this is why I don't think we see very much of this, at least in late game. You could of course take this early on, and then when you get your versatility features later on at ASI levels, you could of course swap this out for something better like protection, like we'll talk about here in a second. But this is still pretty decent. You could reduce the damage down to 0 if they do less than whatever you roll, but you could also just roll a 1 and get as low as 3 damage knocked off of there, which, I mean, every little bit helps, right? That could be the difference between alive and dead, up and down. It could make a huge difference. But overall, statistically, it's unlikely that it'll make a massive change in the long run. Now, protection is basically the better brother of the interception fighting style. So you also have to be within 5 feet of a creature that's getting attacked. Now, you have to be holding a shield in this specific instance. It's not just a sword or a shield, or a weapon or a shield. This one has to be specifically a shield, but you can impose disadvantage on the attack rather than reducing damage. Statistically, this is going to be better than the other one almost every time, because you are reducing the damage to 0 if they end up missing said attack. Overall, that's way better than interception. I think protection is really good. Interception is basically there for those who want a little bit of a defensive capability for their friends, but don't carry a shield. But I mean, overall, protection is just better, so use that instead. It is what it is. Superior Technique is a new-ish one, and it actually allows you to take a Battlemaster maneuver. Now, the Battlemaster is a subclass of fighter, which we will talk about here in a few weeks as we continue with our series. But they get a big long list of maneuvers. I'm not going to go into those today. Just know that they are versatile and they are useful, but we will go into detail on those later. But we do get one maneuver and one die in order to fuel it. So we pick the maneuver from the big long list, and if the maneuver requires a roll of a die, then we have a d6 that we can roll with it, and we of course can do that once per short rest. It can help, right? There is something like the trip attack. There is the goading attack that's also really good. There are plenty of them that require a dice roll. There are plenty of them that require saving throws on the opponent's part, in which case it's based on either your strength or dex modifier, depending on whichever one you want. But overall, very good, very good. Thrown weapon fighting is one that I hardly ever see because nobody really uses thrown weapons, at least that I see online. There's not a huge focus on it, and I guess the reason is because it's not Great Weapon Master, right? It's not compatible with that. But you can actually do a ton of damage with a very specific build of thrown weapon fighting. If you build your build very specifically and intentionally in a way that is made for damage, this fighting style can actually cause you to deal a bunch of damage, and a lot of people don't even know how to unlock it. It's a very interesting workshop in just how crazy you can get as far as your damage numbers go. It's absolutely insane what you can do, but you basically can draw a weapon as part of the attack that you make with the weapon. So the way this works is normally you can only draw or stow one weapon during your turn. That's it. So if you want to make 2 attacks and you have no weapons in your hand, you can draw one and throw it as the attack, right? That's basically interaction / draw and stow, and then throw is the attack. You have the extra attack feature, but you do not have this fighting style. You cannot draw that second weapon in order to throw it. So you basically are foregoing that second attack. That's where this comes in and allows you to, as long as you have an attack to use, you can draw a weapon for it. Again, as long as you have enough of those weapons on you. So that's huge for thrown weapons, and you also get a +2 to the damage rolls. Also really, really nice. So again, in specific build situations, that actually can be quite busted. So yeah, it's actually pretty good. Two weapon fighting just as a mechanic in D&D in general is bad, and this doesn't make a huge difference. When you engage in 2-weapon fighting, you can add your ability mod to the damage of the second attack. So normally once you make your first attack, that's normal. Your second attack is considered basically an offhand attack, and you don't get to add your strength or dex mod to the damage. It's just the die roll. So obviously that can lead to a lot lower damage numbers overall, and so this would help to fix that so that you actually can add strength or dex to the damage. So also kind of useful if this is what you're going for, but like I said, it's a flawed mechanic just from the get-go, so that makes it a little difficult. Then we get unarmed fighting. Unarmed fighting is not the greatest unless you have the martial arts feature, which helps a lot. But with this, you can turn your unarmed strikes into a d6 plus your strength mod, or if you're not holding a weapon in either hand, or shield, then you can actually have a D8 there, which is not that bad, to be honest. If you're wanting to really be that bare knuckle brawler, this could be your way to do it. I definitely would multi-class some in order to clean this up, because it does fall off in effectiveness quite quickly. And so, yeah, if you're wanting an unarmed fighter build, I mean, I can definitely do it, but it's going to definitely have some multi-classing, because this on its own is not going to cut it. And at the start of your turns, you can also deal 1d4 bludgeoning damage to one creature that you grapple as well. So that's also decent. I mean, 1d4 is fine, I guess. It has nothing to do with any attacks that you make against it, though. So, I mean, that's not too bad either. So fighting style in general as a feature. Overall, it's good. There are a lot of options here depending on what kind of style you're wanting to go with. Of course, if you're wanting to focus on ranged weapons, you've got the archery fighting style. Of course, if you want to have a two-handed weapon, you've got great weapon fighting. If you've got a one-handed weapon, you can do dueling. With any of those, you could just pump on defense just to make your AC even higher. You've got a lot of options of ways to go with this, and that makes this a really great feature. You, on average, get more options here than you do with any other class that has this feature as well, although you are missing some of the magic-themed ones that the others get, which is unfortunate. But it's okay. I still think that it's okay. Overall, I'm going to give this a 9 out of 10. Fighting styles are great. They are these little subtle bumps that ultimately can end up making a big difference, especially in the case of the thrown weapon fighting, the blind fighting, depending on your build, and of course the archery fighting style as well, are all pretty transformative if used correctly. Also, first level, we get Second Wind, and this is a lot simpler than the last feature. You get 1d10 plus your fighter level in HP as a bonus action, once per rest. That's it. The scaling obviously is meh. It's not the best, but it's not the worst either. I mean, it's basically rolling a hit die and then just adding your fighter mod. So obviously having more levels in fighter makes this better, but at the same time, 30 is going to be the absolute max that you ever get on this feature. And by the time you're level 20, you've got a ton of HP and you're taking big damage from hits. And so, I mean, 30 may or may not make a difference, just depending. You know, when you're taking 60 some, 70 some damage in a turn, that 30 may not make a huge difference, but it's there. It can definitely help. Overall, though, I think this is an 8 out of 10. It's fine. It's okay. The scaling is meh overall. It's definitely better here at the beginning than it is later, as you start facing better and better opponents that deal more and more damage. At level 2, we get Action Surge, and this is definitely a huge draw for people wanting to dip into fighter. This allows you to take a second action on your turn. That's huge. This allows you to cast more than one leveled spell or 2 cantrips on your turn that both require an action. This could allow you to make extra attack more than once on a turn. So that's really cool. At level 5, that's making 2 attacks on the initial and then 2 more attacks when you action surge, and that only scales up from there as your extra attack gets better on fighter. So yeah, this is really, really good, especially on spellcasters, honestly, but we're not talking about them today. We're talking about fighters, and it's still really good on them. This is a 10 out of 10 feature. I don't know what you expected off of this feature. It's just absolutely fantastic. Yes, it's limited in its uses, but it's a short rest though. So I mean, like, you can kind of get short rests in most of the time and reset this feature and go right back in and just destroy all of your enemies with it again. At 3rd level, we would normally get a choice of a subclass here, but we are, of course, skipping over those today. Each subclass are going to get 2 videos, a ranking, and then either a build or a fix in the coming weeks, but I'll go ahead and list them really quickly for you. The Arcane Archer, the Banneret, the Battlemaster, the Cavalier, the Champion, the Echo Knight, the Eldritch Knight, the Psy Warrior, the Rune Knight, and the Samurai. And of course, we also will be covering the Gunslinger as well, because it is Matt Mercer, and we are covering all of Matt Mercer's things in this as well. And of course, if you don't know what the Banneret is, it's also known as the Purple Dragon Knight, if you've ever heard of that instead. If you've never heard of either of them, There may or may not be a reason, but we're going to cover it as a banneret, but also know that it also goes by Purple Dragon Knight as well. At level 4, we get an ASI or a feat, just like anybody else, and we also get martial versatility. Now, I'm not going to rank this just because it just allows you to choose a different fighting style or Battlemaster maneuver. So obviously this feature is technically better on Battlemasters than it is anyone else, but it does also apply to someone who took the superior technique fighting style and has a Battlemaster maneuver. It also works with that as well. So it does help anyone who took that a little bit more than others. But either way, I mean, as long as you made your right choice at the beginning, then you're good. But if your fighting style changes over time, if what you want to do with your character changes as you grow, you have that versatility here. And so that is nice, but no ranking because it ultimately just kind of either catches screw ups or evolves with the character as needed. At 5th level, we get extra attack, and of course, this is always a 10 out of 10. I always give anything with extra attack 10 out of 10 because 2 attacks always better than 1. Now, this one is especially 10 out of 10 because you eventually get 2 extra attacks, and eventually you get 3 extra attacks actually by the time you reach level 20. That's a lot of damage. That's a ton of damage actually. So you fight on your turn, you attack once, then extra attack, then extra attack. Then you know what? Extra attack again. And then you could action surge and attack again. And then if you have a bonus action attack, then you get a 9th attack. And yeah, it gets kind of stupid with how much damage you can do and just how many attacks you are making within a turn. It's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous what you can do with this. And I absolutely love it. It's really cool. So absolutely a 10 out of 10. Cannot go any less on this. Now at level 6, we see something interesting. This is normally where you would get some other feature. Instead, you get another ASI or a feat. Now there are other classes that get extra ASIs or feats, but this one is pretty cool because, again, the whole human fighter trope that's out there a lot, this kind of makes it to where you don't necessarily have to do that because you get so many more ASI or feats that you would not normally get access to. This definitely helps fighters out a lot to be better at what it is they want to do, whether it is getting constitution up for more hit points, whether it is getting strength up, getting dex up, and it also helps to catch for if you were to ever switch from being a martial character to a ranged character, you could then start catching up that other stat if you ever needed to. Obviously that's not optimal, but it's there if you need it. I don't normally rank ASIs on this, but I mean, that's a 10 out of 10 kind of thing. Getting an extra ASI here, and spoiler alert, we're gonna get another one later. That's huge, and a ton of classes would love to have this. At 7th level, we get a subclass feature. At 8th level, of course, a regularly scheduled ASI. At 9th level, we get Indomitable, and this actually just allows you to re-roll a saving throw that you failed. This is interesting, right? And this is kind of one of the reasons, among a few others, that people say that fighters are just kind of generic, because there's nothing really like unique or defining about this. It doesn't really give you a like straightforward approach as to where you're going to go with this. But to me, I think that that's what makes the fighter actually really cool, is that the door is wide open for your imagination here. This is an absolute blank slate for you to choose what it is that you want to do. All you have to do is pick your weapons for mechanical purposes. And then after that, you go nuts with the flavor. And I think that there are just so many different directions that you can go with this that I think it's fine. Now back to Indomitable. Having a reroll on a saving throw is okay. It's not guaranteed success. It isn't a add something to the roll. It's just reroll it. So you have the same chance of getting the same thing when you roll again as you do of succeeding. It's nice getting a second roll, but statistically, you know, you are just as likely to fail the first time as you are the second time. Overall, it's a 7 out of 10. It's okay. It's not the best feature in the world. I would like something a little more exciting personally, but I mean, there are going to be times where this is definitely going to make a big difference, where you are about to be mind controlled, or if it is like a finger of death about to hit you for a ton of damage, something like that. It definitely would be nice to pass that save, and this could do that for you. At level 10, we of course get a subclass feature here. We get our extra attack at 11, another ASI or a feat as regularly scheduled at 12, a second use of Indomitable at 13, a extra ASI at 14, another subclass feature at 15, and ASI at 16, Action Surge twice per rest, and Indomitable 3 times at 17, that's a big level. At 18, another subclass feature for our final one, and ASI, just like everybody else, at 19, and finally the third extra attack as our capstone. Now, one thing that's going to be interesting is seeing what they do with the fighter in 1D&D, because this is one of the few classes out there that already has a feature at every single level. One thing you'll notice with characters, especially that are spellcasters, is that they'll have a lot of dead levels. They'll have a lot of levels where there are no features, and of course I'm talking pre-1D&D. There is a lot of room there just where your next level feature is your higher level spell slot that you got a hold of, which isn't a bad thing, but it can definitely feel like you're not growing as much as what you would like to. And so I understand the disappointment of that. With this, you get a satisfying new feature every single time that you level up. That's why it's really popular. That's why people really like using the fighter, because it's satisfying to use overall. Now, I know that I ranked a lot of these features really, really highly, and I stand by all of those rankings. But there is one thing that is missing from this that is going to cause us to be dragged down a little bit, and it is the lack of spell casting. Now, obviously, we have the Eldritch Knight that can do things like this, but you're limited in that too because it is a 1/3 caster. And in my opinion, the Arcane Trickster for the Rogue chassis does that better than the Eldritch Knight does it on the Fighter chassis. The Fighter just isn't built for that, at least to have been taken a long way into the class. If you're going to make a spellcaster that also has fighting, you're probably going to just go 1 or 2 levels into Fighter, maybe 3, and then you're going to dip. You're just out and you're going to go do something else. If you're going to go mostly fighter, then spells really don't have a whole lot of a use, at least not as much going forward with it. And so that ends up gumming up the system because, I mean, ultimately that's putting off your spell progression, which could be even more detrimental. So not having spellcasting is a huge bummer and definitely takes off points. So where does this land us overall? The fighter is a quite versatile class despite its lack of spellcasting. And so this ends up in a weird spot for me. So we ranked the barbarian as an 8 out of 10 way back in the day. I don't know if I still stand by that ranking, to be honest with you, because I don't know that barbarians are quite an 8 out of 10. They're really tough. They're really tough, but they ultimately don't have ranged capability. The fighter does. The fighter can obviously fight at long range with archery, with crossbows, with thrown weapons. They can use just their bare hands. They can just go nuts. And I think that leads to a much more versatile kind of kit than something like the barbarian does. However, the barbarian has its fair share of things too. Rage obviously is a huge factor when you look at that too, which definitely is a huge bonus over the fighter. Overall, I think I'm going to have to give them the same ranking of an 8 out of 10. Without spellcasting, I really don't know that I can go above a 9, and that's just the unfortunate way that D&D 5e is really set up, that you don't really have a built-in way of dealing AoE damage with this, unless you have like an explosive arrow, in which case you'd have to do something specific for that. You're basically hitting one creature at a time most of the time. There are, of course, exceptions, but most of the time you're hitting one creature at a time, and you're really good at hitting that creature at a time, whether it is up in their face or if it is at a distance. But overall, you know, you're not able to deal any other type of damage but bludgeoning, piercing, or slashing, and then eventually, hopefully, that becomes magical. That's pretty much it. So you're limited there, unfortunately, pretty harshly, and it sucks. It definitely sucks. It's still good though. This is still a very good class. I still recommend that you definitely play this because you can go so many different directions with it. You've got so many places for feats. You've got so many options for races here because you have so many places for feats. You can just do so much with this, and there are ways to do insane amounts of damage with fighters with how many attacks they get, and there are some really cheeky tricks that you can make your fighter go nuts. There's a lot of fun to be had with this class. So that is it for our ranking today. Of course, let me know in the comments below what you think of my ranking. Is it too high? Is it too low? Is it just right? I'd love to know down below. And of course, next week we are starting off with the Arcane Archer, so you're not going to want to miss that. That, of course, will pop up in your feed if you have subscribed and clicked the bell and turned on all notifications so that you don't miss that. Until next time, stay safe out there, stay healthy. We'll see you later. Bye-bye.